from 2013, way back then, between David Letterman and Lindsay Lohan. I guess there's a lot of backlash coming all these years later, which is a little interesting and not that timely if you think about it. So I guess the issue is when David Letterman was interviewing Lindsay Lohan about a future rehab date she was going to be experiencing again, it came back with some backlash. And I've listened to the interview a couple times, and it's interesting. Prior to this, 2012 is when, 2011 is when Addict to Athlete started, and we promoted the end of anonymity and no longer calling us addicts, started to reframe the way that addiction would be looked at. And trust me, we got a lot of interesting views and a lot of interesting points, and we got some pushback from a lot of the old school industry about anonymity, about you know what's said here stays here. You're doing it wrong if you're letting people in. And Addict Athlete, we never believed that. Listening to the interview between David Letterman and Lindsay Lohan was interesting because although he was trying to get some dialogue going, and as he was trying to get some humor kind of bubbled up in it. It was quite offensive. Not to the point where people should be all these years later now freaking out because we're talking 9 years later. It's a little late, you guys. But this is, I guess, a beacon of how far we've come. As we know now, we shouldn't be ashamed of our addictions. It's something that we've experienced, and that when the right principles are applied, healing and change can come. And that's the most amazing comeback story, underdog story known to man. But listening to some of the pushback that society is giving David Letterman now, it's where were you guys 10 years ago? Where were you guys 20 years ago? You can't go back at this point and try to pick apart an interview. It was disrespectful. It was, obviously for its time trying to be an experience of humor and trying to be funny, and it wasn't. Many times Lindsay, tried to shift the conversation, and he rolled it back in. But that was 2013. That was the way that the mentality went. Every celebrity that had an experience that was unfortunately, pushed by addiction, had been drugged, right through the coals and drugged through the mud. And I hope that as we are maturing, and one of the goals on Team Addict to Athlete all those years ago was to redefine the way that people, perceived people with addictions. It's changing, and that's exactly what we want it to do. But to go back and climb up on a soapbox and try to, point out flaws from an interview 9 years ago, that's just stupid. How about you climb on that soapbox and talk about the people that you yourself, have loved, have been struggling? Going back and using hindsight as a metaphor to teach is dumb. And it's this woke society that we're trying to avoid that keeps trying to pretend that they're high and mighty. Don't do that. Get the conversation going in a positive direction. Where is Lindsay Lohan these days? How good is she doing? I'd love to know. It doesn't matter where she's been. It matters where she is now. And I think part of what the society does is trying to find redemption and validation through, pointing out flaws in the past. We've all got those. That's one of the reasons why, addiction recovery used to be so scary to talk about, is because every time you did, you got ridiculed. And so I'm proud of the fact that we've made this much progress over this short amount of time, and there's still a lot of work to be done. I remember there was a late night host that spoke about Britney Spears, and it's a great interview, and I'll attach it to this so you guys can go back and watch it. And as he was talking about, hey, we shouldn't be talking smack on Britney Spears or whoever. And he went into his own addiction and started talking about how there was a time by which he was close to dying. He was close to committing suicide, throwing himself off of a bridge on Christmas Eve, no less. And he talked about how it's easy to get behind the humor and the pointing of the fingers and whatnot, but they're real people too. But many celebrities throughout my experience, and they're all just real people battling the same things that we are. But I love the fact that Greg Ferguson talked deeply about his own issues and why it's, mental health is such a scary thing to talk about. And that was many years ago. So to get up on a soapbox and try to point fingers at David Letterman for having an interview with Lindsay Lohan and kind of bringing out, dare we say, some of the humor of the situation, we can look back at it now and cringe, and I'm glad that we can. But to pretend like now we're the social justice, seekers, and that we're the ones that can go back and correct those mistakes 9 years after, where were you? It's great to be woke now in 2021, and everyone is. But we also can't glamorize the fact that it's a situation that was unfortunate, but it's changing. And I think a lot of it still has to change. I still think anonymity is a bad thing, and I still think that we don't wear it as a badge of honor, but we certainly don't let it consume us to the point where we're afraid to go out and have a life worth living. So I think sometimes when we get on these soapboxes, even like the one I'm currently on right now, we've got to be delicate. But I'm also not going to pretend that like what he did was wrong or right. It happened. I think that the cool part, if you go back and listen to David Letterman's interview with Lindsay, she stood up for herself. And I think that was a beautiful thing. I didn't catch this back in 2013. I don't know what life was like back then. I can't go back and comment on it. But going back and watching and listening, she did a fantastic job of advocating for herself. And I think that, we are the ones that can change the future, the way that we talk about addiction and recovery. And I also don't think that what we're doing currently is helpful to a point where we don't want to glamorize recovery either. And it's hard to do when you have so many programs and so many outlets and revenue sources for treatment centers and stuff to try and lessen the severity of addiction. But also, guys, it's not something that I think we want to glamorize to the point of making it our identity. Addict to athlete means that you're leaving the addict behind, and that we're dismissing it. It's excused. It's no longer part of our life. I think glamorizing that word addict is a scary thing, because when you adopt a negative label to yourself, even in the light of positivity, it can do great damage. Because then you're one slip, you're one stress, you're one trauma away from waking that beast back up, right? And so there are a lot of traditional ways that people have used that word addict, but we leave it behind. We have to build on that foundation. I do believe people that are in active recovery can do amazing things if they allow themselves the bigger range of scope, meaning to be able to see the entire picture, not just one pinpoint of recovery success. Meaning, to always be in a form or a lifestyle of recovery takes away from so many avenues to a life. I've been clean now for 25 years. There's no way I would identify myself as an addict. It's just not going to happen. Now, the thing is I'm not dumb enough to know that there are trauma thresholds out there. There are things in my life that if I were to experience would probably shake that foundation. But that doesn't mean that it would be like, me like being an addict still. So what I mean by that is it's replaced itself with a father, and with a son, and with a scholar, and with a therapist, and with so many other attributes that addict is so far behind me. I don't use it as a scapegoat anymore. I don't wear it as a badge of honor. I realize that it's still very much a part of me, but not who I am. And so when we do these kind of mindset, past, back to the future, I guess you could say, kind of experiences where we go back and we try to criticize society or the situations for, labeling, Lindsay as an addict or whoever, Brittany as an addict. Shame on us for not doing anything then. Be cautious about jumping on a pedestal if you're looking at these kind of things and going back and trying to criticize the way that we handle things because we were wrong. There's so many things I've seen. I remember tough love, the industry of tough love, and it's still very much a part of our lexicon today in recovery. If you have an addict in the home, tough love, kick them out. You guys know how I feel about Al-Anon and the way that they use tough love. It's dumb. It doesn't work in 2021. You can go back and look at that and realize that those things don't work. what it does is it avoids that real relationship that needs to either heal or be terminated so that healing can occur. So there's so many things that we've done wrong in the past that we can go back and criticize, that we've done, hopefully we'll do right in the future. But we've got to stay in the here and now for that kind of stuff. It was interesting to catch this news story and get into, the intricacies of why now in 2021, this interview with Lindsay Lohan and David Letterman has gotten so much attention. It's, don't be that armchair cowboy. It's the dumbest thing. What are we doing now, right? Because right now, the big thing is medicated assisted therapy, right? It's a big deal. I've seen it work. Who knows? Maybe in 10 years, we're going to look back and think, well, that was stupid. But it's where we're at right now. And so if we make the best decisions today, hopefully tomorrow we'll have some more data, some more information on how to, either stay the course or change direction. It's the same thing with 12 steps. 12 steps have been around for millennia, but it's not the only way to stay clean. It's one way. It's going to be a personal choice and a personal journey. So be careful on where you're going with this kind of stuff, society. I'd be cautious because, again, you look like a hypocrite and you look really stupid when you go back 9 years trying to pick apart an interview from David Letterman to Lindsay Lohan and not knowing the whole context. Yeah, on the surface, it's cringy now. And I'm glad it's cringy now because it means we're not going to do it in the future. But to go back and look at it and think that you're high and mighty and that you would have done anything different, you're wrong. You wouldn't have. That's why in 2011, when we first started and we started talking about not being anonymous anymore, we ruffled a lot of feathers. And instead of just going with the flow, we continued our message. Some of the things that we talk about and do on Team Addict to Athlete is very controversial. Running in and of itself, athletics, health, and recreation, we get hit all the time with people saying, well, you're just erasing addiction or replacing it with an addiction. No, because using heroin and going for a run every day, they're two very different things, right? Plus, the bonus effect of we create balance here on this team. We're not just out running like crazy people, tearing our shirts off and running naked through the woods. Come on. We're creating balance. We're creating education opportunities. We're creating a team. We're creating experiences and speaking engagements and advocacy. We're doing community service. We're doing so much more than just athletics. So when you say things like, well, you're just switching addictions, it tells me you're not doing your homework. You got to do your research a little bit. But I also know that things won't change unless we realize that the past was there. So I wouldn't say don't go back and review these things like we're talking about with David Letterman and Lindsay Lohan's interview. Go back and watch it. Be thankful that we're changing society, that we're changing the way that we talk about this kind of stuff. From the way that I do therapy has changed over the last 20 years. For those that know Coach Blue as a therapist many years ago too in group settings, it was a very kind of, go for the throat and massage the heart. And so there was a lot of controversy there. I think a lot of times now we're seeing that when you hold someone accountable, they get super scared. And so most people don't dare to engage in conflict because they don't know how to resolve it. Conflict resolution within your addiction, on your path through recovery to heal from addiction. It's a scary thing because most of us don't have a problem with opening up the trauma. A lot of us have a hard time helping someone heal from the trauma. So I think it's kind of an interesting concept. I would definitely go back and look at this and maybe get a little feel for what I'm talking about here. I think that the interview was actually quite amazing. And I was proud of Lindsay for standing up for herself as best that she could. I'm not a believer in residential treatment these days because of how much you don't get. I think the real work happens outside of those doors and can happen when you align yourself with the people, with the experiences, with the purpose that I think you should establish in residential treatment. A lot of times you go there for their paycheck. many times I would use the term, hey, client, employees here at whatever treatment center, we're here for them. They're not here for us. And I had a hard time translating because at the end of the day, it's a business. And so if you're in the business of, helping people heal from addiction, do you want to heal yourself out of a job? And I know so many people want to stand up on a soapbox and say, yeah, that's the goal. The goal here is to not have any of this, when really they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars. That is ludicrous. It's disturbing. And it seems to me like unethical. So there's a lot of horrible programs out there, and there's a lot of good ones. I feel bad when I heard Lindsay talk about going back for a third time, which tells me that there was stuff that wasn't addressed, that there were tiptoes, and side steps around some of the core issues. Why? Because it's a business. And if someone leaves the business, right, then you don't get paid. So a lot of times they placate. If you truly want to heal from addiction, you got to do the heavy lifting. It's an emotional burden. There's so much trust, and there's so much, fear that goes into making that first step, that if you're going back to multiple episodes of treatment, it means you're leaving something in the tank. You're not letting it all out, guys, gals. You can get treatment at the world's worst treatment center or the world's most posh. It 110% depends on you. And so I've seen some pretty horrible treatment centers that are still rocking and rolling, because people will pay for it. And you go there with that false hope of hoping that I'm going to cross this line and they're going to teach me something different. And that's not the case, right? Most of the time, you're going to be warehoused through the trauma so that you can have a fighting chance on the other side. But there's so many distractions, right? Same-sex treatment centers, horrible idea, right? Because there's always that fraternizing. Treatment centers that allow staff to fraternize with clients afterwards, where relationships begin, where you have a client now that becomes an employee, and then love interests, and it's weird, man. It's this weird, sticky, kind of gross, incestual kind of thing. That unfortunately isn't where you get help. Okay, so it boils down to, well, where do you then? Where do you get the real help? To each his own, everybody. Okay, you'll find it in residential, you'll find it in outpatient, you'll find it in community meetings, you'll find it alone, you'll find it with the group, you'll find it with a team. It's like your own Dr. Seuss experience there. But if you find yourself having to go to the same places to try and get something new, right? What do they call the definition of insanity? Step out of that comfort zone. Get your mindset into a place of active healing, not just recovery, but healing from the stuff that caused the pain, that created the addiction. Get into that kind of mindset. And it hurts. You're going to have to trust the person that's sitting on the other side of that couch from you. That therapist, that counselor, that person who's really vested and interested in you. You got to open up. You got to trust them. You got to push yourself through some pretty difficult experiences of life. We talk about this all the time on Team Addict to Athlete, where if you're running a marathon, there's typically this wall. It's a concept where you're running for so long and you still have so much further to go, but then you hit the wall, and it's like, what do you do? Do you stop? Do you find a way over, through, around, or under it? The cool part about it is the only person that can get through that is you. And so on the physical realm, as you're running and you hit this wall, if you keep moving forward, you'll catch what's called the second wind. And the second wind will push you through that experience, and you'll get that last breath of air. You get right through that wall, and you'll finish. On an emotional level, in therapy, in treatment, when you hit that wall, what do? Well, most times treatment centers kick you out because you're failure to thrive, or you're pushing back, or you're doing some stuff that's kind of out of the norm. Some treatment centers will keep you despite the wall, and they'll baby you through it, and they'll coddle you over it. No one can get past that point but you. That emotional wall could be the trauma that you've experienced. It could be relationships that you've had. But the cool part about it is once you catch that second wind, you'll finish strong. And so I would say be mindful of what your addictions taught you. Be mindful of what that core issue is that's keeping you stuck. Don't just go to a program or into a situation with any therapist or counselor that just wants you to feel better. That's kind of lame, right? Because they're not doing anything but patching the wound. You want someone that helps identify the wound, unwraps it, scrubs it. It hurts like the dickens. They wrap it back up and they say, okay, come back tomorrow. We're doing it again. And slowly but surely over time, that wound heals. But each time it's unwrapped and each time it's scrubbed, it's going to hurt. So if you're promised a therapy situation or experience by which stuff's not going to hurt, go somewhere else. All this kind of leads me back to the point why we started, and I'll let you guys go. All of it kind of boils back down to hindsight, obviously 2020. We've learned a lot in the last 9 years. Shoot, Addict to Athlete's turning 10 this year. And I'm kind of impressed, by the whole concept of what we're doing working. This COVID thing's been mean to Team Addict to Athlete because we haven't been able to be unified and together as much as I want. And hopefully that's turning. The tides are turning on that. But quit hiding, right? For those of you that have a loved one in addiction, don't pull the woke community and go back and try and point out flaws from many years ago. Start in the here and now. Go back and listen to Lindsay Lohan and David Letterman's interview. It's cringy, and it's supposed to be, because if it wasn't, we'd still be making those mistakes, right? But don't pretend like you would have done anything better, because you wouldn't have. I read some of these comments that are associated, now in the social media world, and I'm like, you guys are all fools, a bunch of pansies, picking on David Letterman now for asking, dumb questions. They are, but it was so long ago. You can't change anything. You can change how we react now. So don't be a social media justice, fighter and try to go back and wake up the community and get people canceled, because that's dumb. Look yourself in the mirror and say, what can I do today to help someone in addiction today? It's the way that I think we should be doing things. Athletes, viewers, listeners, thanks for sharing this time with me. I'm going to do some more of these live views as we have them tonight, one-on-one live with Coach Blue. Check it out on Facebook, social media. Hope to see you there.